where we are from Stantec. After that, brief synopsis from Stantec and any additional input from City Manager regarding the Stantec presentation. Then we'll allow Commissioner Peebles to make his comments in regards to the tier system. And then if we have any questions among us as a commission at that time, we'll discuss the tier system. Or if we have any specific questions towards that, then we will turn to Commissioner Warwick for his presentation. And after his presentation and discussion from that, then we will hear from the Finance Review Committee for their recommendations per reviewing the information they received from Stantec in regards to the stormwater updates. And then after discussing that and hearing back from them, then we will also take time to hear from the public. City Manager.
Yes, so we did go back and talk to Stantec about a couple of suggestions that were actually from the Finance Review Committee. We just asked that Stantec be on the line for any additional questions that the commission may have. We've asked them to do a shorter presentation, not really go through a lot of the presentation, but really just the crux of it, where we were and where we're trying to go. One of the things that I think that the commission asked that we did do is just look at different tiers, see how it looks in the future. Stantec did do that, and so they're just going to present some findings from that and go from there.
All right, thank you. At this time, we'll hear from Stantec.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and share my screen, Vicki, and I will go over the presentation that we presented earlier this year and really hit the highlights. Give me 1 second. Perfect. Is my screen coming through clear?
Yes.
Perfect. I will go through, this is the same presentation we gave the commission earlier this year. I'm going to go through to a couple slides just to truncate the presentation to the core elements that we discussed last time we were in front of you. If we go through the first, really breaking this into two parts. The analysis that we conducted for the city this year was first a revenue sufficiency study to understand how sustainably funded the operations are for stormwater, looking at current revenues and playing those forward into the next 5 years. This slide right here shows the status quo, which would be if we have to do the projects that we have and we have the O&M costs that we currently have in the system, a gap would evolve over the next few years, and that's shown through the negative reserve balances here, essentially showing that we're spending more than we're bringing in order to deliver the core projects we need to, as well as pay for personnel and operations and maintenance expenses. So the status quo is unsustainable, and during the presentation earlier this year, we had proposed two different options for the commission's consideration. One would be scenario one, which was a 70% increase in fiscal year 2026, which would raise stormwater fee revenues to roughly $3 million a year. That would maintain now stable reserves throughout the 5-year projection period, and it would allow the stormwater utility to fully fund the capital plan that has been adopted and looked at over the next 5 years. So this would be one sustainable plan. We know this is a pretty large increase, though, from current revenue levels, and comes with, and I'll talk about in a second, some substantial bill impacts and impacts to customers throughout the community that this service is provided to. So we had also prepared an alternative scenario, scenario two, which would involve bringing in some surtax revenue into the utility in order to provide additional funding that would allow us to decrease that overall jump in revenue that was needed. So under scenario two in fiscal year 26, the increase, instead of being 70%, would only need to be 50%. And that would bring us to a situation again where we're maintaining stable reserves over the long term here. We're also able to fund capital over that time. And so those were the two revenue scenarios that we presented. And I believe the conversations as we had that meeting really coalesced around the second option, the idea that bringing in some surtax revenue in the meantime would help us deliver capital, but also manage some of the customer impacts when we get to the second part of this presentation, which I'll switch over to right now, which was the discussion about tiers and structure impacts, which really, if you think about this in two discrete thoughts, this is how much money do we need? The second question we were trying to answer in that presentation is how do we collect that money? What is the structure and the set of fees that we would need to assess on properties to generate this amount of money overall? And so to start that discussion, one has to first think about the current fees. And so in the current fees, there was a couple observations that I presented last time I was in front of the commission. The current fees currently have 3 tiers in place. The tiers right now are a little bit disproportional. So the first tier is really, really large, was one of my first observations. 52% of all parcels sit within that tier. On an ideal situation, that would be a bit smaller, and the second tier would be a bit bigger, which is follows a lot of the other options that I will provide in the next few slides, just as far as an updated tier. 3-tier system, a 4-tier system, or a 5-tier system. That is one of the items that we want to fix, regardless of how many tiers we have, is get the tiers very proportional around the mean parcel. The second item that's a core observation is the billing unit. And so the EBU right now is 3,700 square feet. I've put it up on this chart. That is a critical part of how the fee structure works. It essentially identifies the average, or in this case, the unit that we use to define a single family home. We use that on the non-residential side to divide square feet and come up with the number of EBUs that's assigned to every commercial parcel. And within this structure, we use this as the key pricing point to price the tiers. What I have described in the options going forward would be a reconfiguration, as I go to the next slide, that would first and foremost move that EBU to the ERU, and they would move it down from its current position to 2,800 square feet. That is perfectly in alignment with how parcels currently have in the single family customer class their impervious area. So that is the average impervious area for all single family homes currently within the city of Lynn Haven. And so we want that symmetry where that sits right in the middle. And you'll also notice in all of these options that we now have a really good symmetry where that middle tier is going to hold the majority of parcels. So you want this to kind of look back to a high school statistics class where you've got the bell curve, right? And you've got most of your parcels in that first one deviation from the mean. We've got 68% of all parcels. And then tier 1 and tier 3 are doing just the outliers that are different from the average, if you will. They're going to charge them a little bit less on the front end if they're a smaller parcel, and a little bit more on the back end for parcels that are greater than the average by 1 standard deviation. And really, this is the core changes that I had when I presented this. When you think about the differences between a tier 3, a tier 4, or a tier 5, the only difference is as we move up on those tiers for a 4 or 5 is we're just slicing the tail up a little bit more on the far right. So it's just allowing a bit more sensitivity for some of the larger parcels that are within the city that look a bit different than the average, and it allows the fee structure to pick that up and charge those parcels a little bit more because they do contribute a bit more stormwater given they're so much different than the average, which is why we had presented a 4-tier or a 5-tier. However, I do want to make the core point here as I transition down to just the bill impacts, which is really where the rubber meets the road. Just jumping ahead a few slides, the big changes here that we're seeing from a bill impact standpoint are the 2 items that I mentioned up front. They're not necessarily the number of tiers. It's much more the idea that we want to recenter the fee structure around the average impervious area. And particularly, I draw out on the impacts that are in front of you, that will impact customers a bit differently than they're charged right now. And so looking in that blue column right there under the tier 3, just for simplicity to draw your attention to, What that means is smaller parcels are pretty similar to where they are right now, a little bit lower in that first one. However, it's that parcel that's sitting right around 2,000 square feet in that range. The bill right now is a bit lower for how much impervious area those types of parcels have. And when I recenter the structure around that, that is where you'll see some of the larger impacts to correct that, to make sure the fee structure is perfectly proportional based on the amount of impervious area. And then really as we go above that, it's more a discussion about larger parcels that are much larger than the average, and they're just getting an assignment with a fee that recognizes that differential as we move from tier 3 to tier 4 to tier 5. So I wanted to kind of hit the highlights, if you will, going through the presentation. I know we went through a lot more detail when we were there last time of the build up to this, but that is, you know, in my mind and how Pete and I ran this analysis, the real crux of this, the big changes that result in some of the changes at the end here that would impact customers going forward. However, I will say, you know, with that in mind, these changes are meant to make this structure, you know, sustainable and also matching the underlying data very, very closely. So we want to be data driven, which is why we came up effectively with the average and with the parcel breakpoints that are presented, whether it's a tier 3, tier 4, or tier 5, and we can discuss the merits of how many tiers or exactly where those are. But I just wanted to make sure with this quick synopsis that I hit those big parts and what we were really thinking, you know, as we went through this update this year to try to present these options in front of the commission. So with that, I'll end, but I'm happy to interject or have any conversations to go back to anything that was covered in more detail when we were there in January.
Thank you for that quick overview and highlight of what you've presented to us previously. And one question, just really for clarity for all of us, is that what we're looking at now is the one-time 50% increase, which should sustain us for the next 5 years. I mean, I know there's variables in regards to the economy and inflation, et cetera, but based on what you're projecting in regards to our projects and our income, that this 50% will help sustain us over the next 5 years, as opposed to us coming back each year trying to make another vote on, do we increase by another 5%, 10%, like maybe what we did initially when it was presented to us to make, you know, a big jump and then vote each year for incremental increases, that this would just be a one-time increase for the next few years.
That is correct. So the option we're showing here, which is currently on your screen, is a 50% jump in revenue this next fiscal year. And then based on our projections, we've tried to factor in everything we know about, right? Project cost, assumed inflation, as well as that additional coming in. Next 5 would be able to make time period without any additional increase in revenue. So this would be a one-time move up, and it would be sustainable for at least the last 5 years. And you know, of course, mentioned that's with all the information we have right now, right?
Right. Now, with this 50% increase, it'll cover the capital projects, the maintenance, the actual employees in that department. Will there be any reserves possible from this increase?
We did factor in reserve balance as one of the core items within the stormwater utility that we looked at this year, was to try to build up reserves. That's always been part of the plan, but it's always been hard to get there, right? There's been a lot of demands on the fund over time, so we have tried to project a minimum reserve of 3 months, and this would get the utility to that over time and maintain that over the next 5 years. It'll likely, you know, oscillate around that number, right? Some years you're going to do a bit more capital, some years you're going to do a bit less, and it'll jump back. But the idea was to target that 3 months of O&M, which allows the city some breathing room, right? If things happen unexpected, or if parts of the system break that aren't expected and you need emergency repairs. That's why folks would have those reserves on hand.
All right. We'll start with Commissioner Peebles and just go through our seats to see if anyone else has any additional questions for Stantec.
Thank you, Mayor. So basically, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I was really starting to do what Stantec did, which was dig into the data, and I noticed what they did, which is that the three-tier system was very skewed in terms of the math. The math just wasn't mathing, as the cool kids say. And so I've I did a bunch of numbers, I did a bunch of math, and to me, it just made sense to spread out the tiers to a 5-tier system, because if the idea of the tier system is to try to get as close to average as possible, like that one slide showed of impervious property, it would make more sense to have 5 tiers to spread it out to be closer to being average, with the outliers, like I like the idea of tier 1 and tier 5 really being the outliers, and the middle tiers kind of pulling the weight. And to me, that was just, I mean, literally, you could, when I was doing the math, you could literally just like make it more, just shift some of the tier 1 of those 52% tier 1 homes. You could just shift them over to tier 2, and you would have gotten the city. I think at the math I did, if you did it right, if you would have made it average among everybody, that would have gained the city like an extra $1 million just by shifting the tiers up a certain way. So really, I just wanted to dig into the tiers like Stantec has done, and I think they did an excellent job with the tier system, and I like the idea of surtax. The few things I wanted to point out is there are some other ways we could potentially do the math. We could do, rather than a tier system at all, we could just do strictly, a straight 280, like a straight cost against everyone. I don't suggest this. This is just suggestions to think about. I like the tier system. I'm just throwing some other ideas out there. You can do a straight fee across everyone and things like that. The only thing the one downfall, and I didn't really dig into this, and maybe we can talk about it some more, is the vacant land. I don't know if we want to dig into that a little bit more. And another thing I was thinking about was, I don't know if we can, maybe Ben can answer this for me, but can we use CRA funds for properties in the CRA area as an incentive program to do kind of like I guess you could call it assessment fee breaks if citizens were to, I don't know, build their own retention pond or something like that? I mean, I think I'm outside of the CRA, so this wouldn't affect me, but for example, I literally have a retention pond on my property. I am holding more water than I am letting out. And so I'm wondering if there's something we could do for people that live within the CRA to do something like that.
So to answer your question, I would have to look into the CRA plan to see if this would be an allowable project or expense under the CRA plan. I do want to point out that back then the feasibility study, when the feasibility study for the CRA was done, it outlined that one of the blight conditions was the lack of drainage within the CRA. So we have done some improvements over the years, installed some additional stormwater piping, added some concrete canvas to an existing ditch to improve the water flow. So we have made some improvements there.
Yeah.
So it's not that nothing has been done on that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I didn't mean to
also, I mean,
imply that.
just to be clear, in terms of geography, these numbers reflect the entire city, and CRA is just the downtown part.
Right. I was just trying to think of a way that we could incentivize people to make it to where they fix their own problems. If you can incentivize someone to dig a way to retain water on their own property, then the city staff doesn't have to go out there and do it, so we don't have to spend man hours to do it. And just taking, a percentage off of your yearly stormwater assessment fee by using CRA funds. We're not pulling from the stormwater budget, we're pulling from the CRA budget, which is really what it's for, is to help develop areas. So it's just a thought I had. If we can't do it, we can't, but I'd like to maybe explore that in the future. And it really wouldn't affect this vote anyways, because it's just something we can look at in the future to help incentivize citizens to help the city as a whole, rather than just strictly taking money out of the stormwater budget. But that's really all I have. I just wanted to, the main point I'm trying to get at is, I love the tier system. I think the math is a lot better now than it was. I like the surtax idea. but there are other options out there. I'm not dying on this hill is what I'm trying to get at. But I just wanted to thank Stantec and the city for taking time and really exploring this for me and for the rest of us and for the citizens, because I think it's a good thing.
Commissioner Perno.
How long have we been doing this? Since we set it up? 4 years? Okay. And we've gotten to a point where we're using the tier system, right? Okay. And this 50% more revenue would include a surtax, correct? To help fund another way? Yes?
Yeah.
And we're looking at the crux of our homes. 26, these parcels would be the rooftops, right, or the properties? 2642, 1774, and 440 on the 2,000, 3,200, and the 4,200 impervious square footage. Are these accurate? Is this right? So the majority of our people lie within one range. They're all getting charged the same, right? It's the average. That's more than, if you added up the other ones, it would be that's the most. I mean, if you spread it out any further, you're looking at higher the square footage, the more they should pay, basically, the bigger the house, all that kind of stuff. I mean, 3 or 4 tiers falls in line perfect, I think. So I mean, 5 tiers is great. It spreads it way out, but you're using bookends with the highest and the lowest, kind of. So why not keep it more toward the average like it is?
That's my point, is that it's the current 3-tier system that we have. If you wanted it to be more average, you'd need to shift more homes from tier 1 and put them into tier 2.
And this kind of
this is a proposed one. This isn't what we have now.
Okay, that's what I'm saying, because it's an increase in revenue and it's using a surtax.
Right.
But it hits the average a lot better than anything we've had so far.
Yeah, I mean, doing what the 3 tiers, the new proposed tier 3 system is better than the 3-tier system we have right now. I mean, I can agree to that.
And that's what we're looking at. That's kind of what I'm thinking, is that what was before me there, it's just switched back to another slide, but I'm okay with that, and they came and talked to us before, and this thing's evolved a lot. It kind of went stale for a couple years because we had things going on that we felt like we didn't need to increase anything for our citizens, but by doing that, we're putting the brakes on this. We slowed it down to a point where now we need to do something and get it back up so we can get capital projects going. So what I'm looking at, like I said, 3 tiers or 4 tiers, where it's going is what I'd be for. So that's it.
Commissioner Ward.
So I'm glad we're talking about this now, getting some ideas out there. Probably most of my comments is on my presentation, but one thing Commissioner Peebles touched on about incentives and that, I would actually like to see us spend more money on the concrete canvassing, because I think that'll save us in the long run. That's going to save us money in ditch digging and that, so it'll decrease expenses so that we won't have to raise a stormwater fee as much in the future, and I think that would be a good investment. So it's kind of where my head's at, but that's all I really have right now.
Commissioner Vandegrift.
Well, generally, the way it is now, we're maintaining, that's about it. We're paying the bills. In tier 1, 2, and 3, I like the proposal of going to 4 and 5. I think it's more equitable, like Mr. Peoples suggested. You're spreading it out and giving an opportunity for it to be more of a, like I said, equitable to the citizens. My question is, are we looking at the 50% increase now?
Yes. Well, we're not voting today, but that's what we're looking at as a 50% increase, because it's either keeping it as is, which is no increase, which then puts us into the negative projection, or having some type of increase. And as Commissioner Perno mentioned mentioned a few moments ago, when we initially installed this procedure 4 years ago, we were supposed to have incremental increases each year. That was what we had thought we would do. However, with inflation and other financial challenges to our community, we opted not to add another bill, not to increase that bill over the, maybe twice we maybe didn't increase it, which now brings us back to here. So we're sort of trying to make up for what we didn't do, but also hoping that with this one-time increase that we won't have to come back for the next few years to reconsider it again. Because the previous plan was reconsidering it each year in regards to increases.
So these are real numbers on this slide
Yes.
for the 50% increase.
Which includes the 300,000 surtax each year. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your input. Now we're going to switch over to Commissioner Ward.
All right. So I know this is a tough issue. This is, I've been talking to a lot of residents, and stormwater is one of the top 3 issues that they've talked to me, and they definitely have a lot of concerns, especially when you talk to the seniors that are on a fixed income. They're worried about this. So I just have some ideas. I don't know if any of them come to fruition, but hopefully it'll spur some other good ideas. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of what I did, is I looked at the Stantec presentation and the 3-tier reconfigured. And when you reconfigure it, you can see if they increase it the 50% and the 70%, if you're under 1,600, your bill actually goes down. And if you're between 1,600 and 2,900, it'll either go up $98 or $124, depending if we do a 50 or 70% increase. Oh. Thank you. And then this is the tier 2. Doesn't seem too bad for this one. It only goes up by $20 and $45 for the 70% more revenue. And then tier 3, kind of the same deal, where if you fall in that one criteria, your bill will actually go down, and then over 4,300, it goes up quite a bit more. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there so that, especially, let me go back a little bit, especially like this one, this is the one that concerns me, is the 1,600 to 2,900. Chances are that person doesn't have a whole lot of revenue. They might be, low income, and last thing I want to do is break the bank for them. So that's kind of why I wanted to show that to everyone, something to think about. And then I know we talked about vacant lots. Well, I actually did look into that. And I know this has been brought up before, and the way we currently have it, it doesn't address the vacant lot. So if you have a vacant lot that's 0.21 acres, you're paying the same amount as someone in a tier 1. Someone that's got a 1/4 of an acre, you're paying more than someone that's in tier 1. And if you got a 1/2 acre, you're paying more than tier 2, even though you may not have any impervious area. So I think we need to address that. So as I was doing my research, I looked around at some other cities, and Hialeah is one of the cities I looked at. There's a couple others that are similar to this. I think the other 2 I saw was St. Petersburg and Jacksonville. And what they do is their methodology is pretty much the same as ours. The rate's not the same, of course. But they use the ERU, and of course ours is $169 per 1 ERU. But on theirs, for each dwelling, they actually put it on the utility bill. As with ours, we put it on the as a non ad valorem fee, which goes up to the county, and it gets pretty much paid with your property taxes. So I was able to actually talk to an individual named Carl about this. And I got a lot of great information. So I asked him, I said, well, how do you put it on the monthly bill? And he goes, well, our billing department, they do it. They just put it on the bill. And I asked him some more questions on that, which I'll address a little bit later in the later slides. But they were able to do that. That's for residential. Okay. And so for non-residential, they pretty much use the same methodology. They also put it on the utility bill, so it's a monthly fee. And so they charge X amount, depending on how many square foot of impervious area, the same thing we do. So ours is currently $169 for every 3,900 square foot. And then I asked, when I talked to Carl at Hialeah, I asked him about vacant lots. I said, how do you guys charge vacant lots? He goes, actually, we have little to no vacant lots, so it's not an issue there. So it's a pretty dense area. But we currently charge $39 for every 3,900 square foot of gross parcel area. So not impervious area, gross parcel area. So I looked at multiple different ways of how we could do possibly some other methodologies and different ways. And this is one thing I looked at. What if we charged a flat fee for all utility lines? And then you'll see the graph there. You'll see there's a substantial more amount of residential utility units than they are commercial. And this is why it's important to bring in as many businesses in Lynn Haven, because that helps alleviate rates or help to keep rates and fees down to a reasonable level. So we currently have 10,026 water utility units, and out of those, 9,594 of them are residential. So those are going to have the biggest impact on your stormwater assessment fee. So I looked, what if you just charge everybody the same amount, and I set it at $2 million. You would charge about $200 a year, which would be about $1,662 a month. Even if you were to bring it up, even if you were to increase the commercial counts, you could bring it down, but it wouldn't make a substantial difference since there's only 432 of those utility units. So this one didn't make sense to me, because if you look at like the one that pays the most for stormwater, I mean, it's over $40,000. And then you're going to tell them they're going to pay, now you're going to pay about $300-400 a year. It didn't make any sense to me. So the only reason I'm showing you this is so you can kind of see how many utility units we have, commercial versus residential. And just to show you, I've tried to look at different methodologies. So this was a possible solution. I looked at is, what if we charge $210 per ERU across the board? And if we did, it would increase Tier 1 by $22 a year, so it's less than $2 a month. Tier 2 would increase by $41 a year, so less than $4 a month, and Tier 3 would increase by $62. And that's if we kept the three-tier system the same, not the reconfigured that was talked about earlier. So it's a little more than $5 a month. And then, of course, we can adjust that. But if we did that, we'll bring in, and I say approximately $2 million of stormwater revenue, because there's a few things in there. I'm not sure how it might change the numbers. But I know there's a lot of information on this slide. But the other thing I did, you notice too, if you look at vacant, I took it from $39 per 3,900 square foot to $12. So it's a substantial decrease for the vacant lots. So these are some of the questions and things I think we could think about is, can we do a monthly bill every month? Is it feasible? When I talked to Carl at Hialeah, I asked him, what if you have a rental property and let's say it's vacant for 2-3 months, or someone puts a house on the market and it's vacant for 2-3 months? Does that mean that's lost revenue for those 2-3 months? And he said, no, what they do is every lot has a property owner, and then they send that bill to the property owner. I don't know how they do it, but they send it to the property owner. And, that could be a challenge for the billing department to try to track all that down. The other question I have is, how much do we pay the county for these administrative actions as opposed to if we did that? And earlier when I said it brought in about $2 million, and that doesn't even include the surtax, there's a difference between a master meter and every apartment having their own meter. So for example, let's say you have an apartment complex that has 100 units. If you have a master meter that supplies to all those units, then what happens is they fall under the non-residential, so they'll pay the $169 for every 3,900 square feet. But then there's some apartment complexes where every single unit has their own water meter. So then, instead of the apartment complex paying the non-residential rate, each apartment will pay the residential rate. And so I asked Carl about that, and he said that's kind of how they do that, and I imagine that's how we would do that also, even if we did do this. I looked at past year developments, and the reason I brought this up is this is more revenue that could be bringing in for stormwater as we get more developments into Lynn Haven. So this past year, from March 2024 to March 2025, we had 52 single-family dwellings, 87 manufactured homes, and 27 commercial buildings. So that's going to be an increased revenue. But I think the other thing we need to look at is the surtax. I'm not sure how much we currently have, but could we put more surtax money in stormwater? Would it be worth it, or are we wanting to use it for something else? That might be a conversation that we need to have. But those are my thoughts and ideas. And I figured that would be a good time to bring it up for discussion, see what you thought.
All right. Thank you for the research and the information that you provided. And you mentioned that this would generate $2 million in revenue.
Approximately.
And
I know that's less than the 2.6 to 3 million that we're originally looking at.
got it.
But that doesn't include the surtax. So if you include the surtax, it could be about 2.3 million. If my numbers are right, I'm not saying they're all right, because there's some different scenarios like I talked about with the master meter and ones that have it for every unit.
And I think the number you mentioned, the chart, so now are you proposing just a flat fee of the 210 for everyone, or do you have, I guess, what are you proposing with on the bill? Do you have 2 or 3 different scenarios that you're proposing, or just?
No, this is just one scenario.
Okay.
So yeah, it's 210 per ERU. So tier 2 is 1.0. I think tier 1's 0.54, and then tier 3 is 1.5. And then you look at non-residential, instead of them paying 169 per 3,900 square foot, they would pay 210 per 39 square foot.
Okay.
So it'd be across the board.
All right. Those are my questions. Starting with Commissioner Peebles.
One thing I guess I would ask if it was utility bill, how would that be handled with like places like Walmart that are much larger? That's what I haven't grasped how that would be handled.
I don't know. I know when I talked to Carl, that's what he said at Hialeah, Florida. He said they just put it on their utility bill and they send it to him, and they pay him monthly just like the residential.
Okay, so we just have to, I guess the hard part would be figuring out, because if it's easy with citizens because it's a flat rate, but like we wouldn't charge Walmart the same as like Wild Root or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, theirs would be based on the every 3,900 square foot of impervious area. It wouldn't be the different tiers like the residential.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, yes, yeah.
I got you. So the commercial goes back to the 3,900.
Right.
Okay.
All the non-residential or commercial, whatever you want to call it. Yes, sir.
Got it. So then that's what we would do with the apartments. For those that have the master meter would be the 3,900. And those that don't have the master meter, it would just be the individual
units. Yeah. So the individual units will pay the residential rate. If you have a master meter, then that apartment complex would pay 3,900 square foot of impervious area for every 3,900 square foot of impervious area.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Perno?
Look, if you guys want to put it on the bill, and that's what, and that seems to be consensus. I don't know where we're going with that, because we've come this far with what we've done. But if that's an option and people want it, you know, I do feel like the people with the vacant land are getting the bad end of the stick here, and whatever we could do to alleviate that. But we cast a wider net right now with the property tax. So by establishing that, we've evolved on it. Yeah, we went flat for 2 years, and that's what we're doing. We're making up for that right now. In a lot of ways, we should have possibly just let it run its course, and we'd have been in better shape today. But you know, that's an option, and you know, if it's what we all agree on, you know, I'll move ahead with it. But we're going to have to hear from people after this. So.
And that's why I'm bringing it up, is I thought if I brought it up now, because I've had some residents come to me and say, you know, what if we did it monthly? You know, because I know I said this before, doesn't matter to me. It doesn't change anything for me. If I pay at the end of the year or if I pay by monthly, it's a wash for me. But I think there's, especially lower income residents, I think they look at things more by month or probably even by the week, you know. And so it's a bigger impact to them. So I was hoping by bringing this up now that they'll provide us some feedback.
That's what we need. That's what we need to hear, because what we're doing is we're going to put it on. We're going to put everything on the backs of the people that pay a bill.
Right.
And there's more people involved when we do it with property tax.
Right.
Now that's just the conundrum that when we propose this, that you know, what's the amount of time we're going to hear back from people or what? So.
And that's why I'm glad we're talking about it now.
I'm glad we're talking about it too, because we're way before the vote on this.
Right. And not only that, we need to look at, you know, is it financially feasible for the city to do it? Or do we even have the means to do it? Do we have is the software capable of doing it and things like that? There's going to be a lot of things the city's going to need to look at.
I think the city's already upgraded all that. They're ready for bigger and better things for billing, I think, so.
Yeah, we have, but every city, of course, has a financial software that's different from ours. And so Hialeah they may not have Munis, most people don't. So they may be utilizing some other type of financial software to divide that cost every month. So that's
Hialeah is it's in Dade County. It's in the heart of Dade County. It's in very densely populated area of our state.
Northwest of Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Vandegrift?
All right, so when you hear people complain, they're not complaining about the tier system. They're complaining about the payment method. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say complaining, they're concerned.
I meant concern. Poor choice of words.
I don't want to say a lot of people, but, you know, that's why I want to bring it up now, because
Yeah.
I'm hoping they hear, because I've had some people reach out to me ever since I brought it up, and, you know, maybe a lot of them rather have it monthly, or maybe it doesn't matter to them. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Like me, it doesn't matter to me.
No, I've heard that also, but I truly wanted to know if it's the tier system or if it's the payment system.
I think it's more of how much they have to pay.
Okay. So with the system we have now, there are two issues, well, three issues. We want it to be equitable. The vacant land, or that's not being fair, and the monthly cost. But other than that, if we can work those out, are you in favor of still using the tier system?
I don't know how everyone else feels. I'm good with it.
Too.
And the other thing is, I know the Financial Review Board got together. I haven't been able, I don't know what they talked about, but I'd like to get their recommendation too.
That's the thing.
Yeah, they're going to make a presentation. Yeah.
Well, with
People that have vacant land, I'm sorry. People that have vacant land, you know, they should still have to pay something, because the water even though it's pervious, the water rolls off there and has to go somewhere. So So we should include them at some degree. Well, whether it's fair, for, there should be some accountability for that. I can't put a dollar amount on it, but everybody should pay in the way it goes. Stormwater's everywhere. It's not just, and I've talked to people who've said, I'm happy to pay because even though it doesn't affect me, I know we're getting better from this, and we're doing things to help. I mean, stormwater's come a long way in a short amount of time. And this fellow over here, you guys have done a great job with what you've done to have impact on our city. With what you've done so far. So we need to keep their arsenal, ready to go. So. Because we are always going to be Lynn Haven. We're going to be the lowest of the low parts of the county. So,
You found people that like to pay?
I talked to a guy who lives over here off of and it was a while back, and he had the mentality that, I don't flood. Where I'm built, I don't flood, but I know that there's areas of the town that do flood, and when I pay my share, he feels like that it's fair, it's equitable.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I'm just thinking that, he was a proud Rotarian when the fellow I was talking to, I won't say his name, but he doesn't mind paying to help make Lynn Haven better. You know what I mean?
Nice.
So I think we got that in respect. We just got to get our arms around what's the best scenario to cast the net and be fair to everybody.
All right, awesome. At this time, we'll hear from Finance Review Committee Representative, Ms. Debbie Ashbrook. They had a very good discussion. I was able to listen in on it during their meeting. Very thorough discussion on the stormwater, some good ideas as well. So we'll like to hear from them.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. There are really three main issues that we looked at this scenario, dissected it apart. The first thing is we didn't like the 70%. We felt the 50% would be better using the $300,000 from the surtax money, but we also felt that there should be some cost of living or some type of increases throughout to 2030. That there's very little money left for emergency. We mentioned a 3-month for reserve. We just felt that wasn't enough, and that the 50% and then maybe a small increment each year after that. And then we had a real problem with the tiers. So like you, Mr. Warwick, they sat there and dissected and did all the math, and we just felt that the tiers, specifically, I'm going to go to the page where it was for 50% more revenue, and the 2,000 square foot and the 32,000 square foot houses, they were significantly increased. The 2,000 square foot house would almost double. And then you look at the higher end, and theirs went down significantly. We just felt the tiers in the scenario of 50% or more didn't make sense to us, and it wasn't fair. But when we went back to the 3 tiers that the city had before, we didn't have a lot of heartburn with that. We just thought it should be spread out a little bit more. So this fancy tier system was just, we didn't like it. And then the third issue was whether or not to put it on a water bill. And we thought that would be a nightmare to put it on a water bill, thinking of rentals and then who's responsible for it. Is it going to be the property owner? Is it the person who's the tenant? It just didn't make sense for us, plus the mechanics behind it. That didn't make sense. So those were our 3 recommendations. And Ms. Gaynor, did I miss anything?
Thank you. That was it, yeah.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Ashbrook? Any clarity on what she just mentioned?
So you didn't like the 5-tier?
Not the way it was structured this way, because if you really look at it carefully, that 2,000, 3,000 square foot home impervious was significantly affected. And you go down and you look at the 7,200 square feet and the 5,500, and you look at the 5th tier, they're yellow, it went down, theirs went down significantly. So that just didn't make sense to us. That middle of the road person's going to pay more, and the people with lots more land are paying less.
Got it. So you all would prefer that in regards to that tier system, that those at the more impervious surface would pay, that their ratio would be more than those that are sort of in the middle carrying the weight, is what you all are saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, they were really concerned about that second tier and taking some of that, those increases and spreading them over to the other 3 or 4 tiers. That second tier is what bothered the finance committee a lot. And so they were saying that that particular tier needed to, some of the increase needed to go to the 3rd, 4th, or 5th tier and take some of those problems off the back of the second tier. So that was the big conversation that the Finance Review Committee had.
And then one more thing about the land. We strongly thought the land should fall into this. They shouldn't be exempt in any way.
I missed that.
The land, that the vacant
land?
lands should be, this should affect them.
Right.
They shouldn't be exempt.
Was there any conversation about them paying the same as they already do or decreasing it or anything like that?
I think it was right along in line.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't have extensive conversation about that. We just assumed it would be right in line with the tiers, with how much impervious land they had.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any additional questions for Ms. Ashbrook?
Yeah, just to reiterate, you guys liked the 3-tier system, but just spread out more.
We thought maybe there could be a 4th tier,
Okay.
not necessarily the 5.
Okay.
So, yeah, and we started doing, with Mr. Ork, doing math and dissecting, and went, wait a minute, that's really not our job. Or we would have come with a PowerPoint.
Yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for that input and feedback. Thank you for the work that you all are doing. Make our jobs harder. Thank you very much.
In a good way.
All right, so we've heard from Finance Review Committee, we've heard from one another. At this time, we're going to open the floor to hear from the public. Let's just go row by row. So we'll start with row number 1 and we'll just go row by row. All right, Mr. Bashir.
Yes, a lot to cover, but I am glad y'all are taking this on early in the process, so there's time for everybody to think about it and to really address this. One question I do have is, when you talk about square foot of impervious surface, you're not considering the size of the property itself. If you've got 6 Lynn Haven lots and 1,000 square foot of impervious surface, that's a lot different to me than if you've got one 50-foot wide Lynn Haven lot and have the same square foot of impervious surface. Just something to think about as you go through this process. And I don't know how difficult it would be to use percent of impervious surface of your overall parcel size. One thing on the paying on your water bill or on your utility bill, that's going to shift the payment to the renters that rent, the people that lease. They've already negotiated their lease with their landlords. They won't get a break. That's just going to be an immediate cost to the tenants in this case. That's one issue I have with the water bills. The second is, I don't know how you're going to collect against the vacant properties if you're charging water bills, because I have a vacant piece of property that I own next to my house that's not included in my parcel. I pay right now, and I'm one of those people, I don't mind paying. I'll never flood at my house, but I get to drive on roads that don't have water standing on them. You know, we pay for school. We don't have kids anymore. I think that's fair. Let's see, using the infrastructure tax. I'm good with using $340,000 a year out of that fund for a while, but we got to remember that's not a free pot of money that we just need to use everywhere. We need to start worrying about other infrastructure things we need to. One complaint that I hear when I'm talking to people is not so much of how much the tax is. It's more to do with they really expected capital projects to be being done with this money, and we're not. And that's something that I think moving forward we need to make sure we do, that whatever we do, if we pass this 50% increase, we need to make sure we fund some capital projects with it, or we're going to have people up here hammering on us for not using their money wisely. Currently, vacant property in Lynn Haven covers about 2.4% of our ad valorem taxes come from vacant property. Now, that's not a per parcel, but that's just an overall to give you an idea of what we see for vacant property in the county. Hialeah County, or Hialeah City, is the 6th largest city in the state. So I appreciate your efforts on that, but it may not be apples to apples or oranges to oranges when you're looking at that. It is good information for certain. What else have I got here? I kind of favor the 5-tier system, but that's something that can be worked out for certain. I think that's pretty much all I had. So thank you.
Thanks for your insight. Anyone else from row 1? All right, row 2. Yes, sir.
We've been at this for 20 years, and I've been here, and it's not working. And Commissioner Jamie knew about that when Syntax put up a big sign, and you can't afford to have our systems working. If I look in the money that we pay out each month, I see approximately close to $50,000 that's given to Syntax. Is that put in with the bills that we're going to have to pay, the citizens have to pay? Paying, if you want the exact number, $46,000 to Syntax, 2 monthly payments. I live in the CRA area. The CRA area, when it doubled the density on the property in certain areas, has caused all kinds of heck with us. Our houses were built in 1922, 1911, 1930, 1940. The new rules and regulations with CRA, you have to bring them up almost 9 feet, new development. One of the new houses that you saw there on the CRA thing, he dumps tremendous amount of water on my property. My property is 2 lots, has 1 house, the other's vacant. My property and a lot of others are on stilts purposely for our stormwater problem and because we are 6 inches above the water table consistently. When it rains, the water table is above. New houses being built or renovation right now are having not septic, but sump pumps put in there that take the water that comes under their buildings or on their property, stormwater, pump it into the sewage system. Sewage system is suffering. Sewage lines are supposed to be separate from the stormwater. They're not. It's taxing us, sewer system. So we have eventual problems. I have no problem paying, putting tax on tax on tax. You know who's bailing you out? You are citizens here. You live here. You're part of it. You're paying and bailing out the difficulties that are brought to us by your staff.
All right. Thank you. Going to Mr. Joe Brown's row. Anybody on your row? All right. Mr. Scray's row.
First thing for you guys to think about is if Governor DeSantis gets his way and property tax goes away, how are you going to collect your revenue? All right. What is an equivalent residential unit, or ERU? An ERU is a unit of measure which serves an index to compare the runoff generated by different sized properties with different amounts of impervious surface. You guys have a roll of all properties that has an assigned ERU for every property. I took that roll and I applied a little bit of math here. Do math every day at work. It's not fun. 10,432 total ERUs. I took the $3 million budget that Chris would like to get. I divided that out. It's $287 per ERU. I applied that ERU to one tier, the ERU tier. No more 3-tier, 4-tier, 5-tier. One tier, it's $287 per ERU. What I came up with is the next thing I did was to be cognizant of vacant properties. I set every vacant property at $100 flat. I don't like that. I think they should pay ERU just like everybody else. That's equality. You pay based on the impervious surface. But if vacant truly means vacant, fine, I set them at $100 per vacant property. What I came up with is $2.7 million to be collected. That is $300,000 short. So if you want to borrow from another fund, which I don't, like Mr. Bashir, I do not recommend that. But if you want to borrow from another fund, borrow from that fund. What does this actually mean, though? What it means is the highest properties with the most ERUs are going to pay the most. The number one ERU property with the most ERUs is Walmart. Currently pays about $42,000. Without a doubt, they have the most impervious surface. Under this system, they would be paying $71,000 a year. Is that fair? They have the most impervious surface. So the top four properties in Lynn Haven with impervious surface have 100 or more ERUs, and it only gets down to about the top 25 before you get below 20 ERUs. How does this affect residents? Tier 3 would be going from 254 to 432. That seems like a steep jump, but if you're in what currently is called the Tier 3, you have 1.5 ERU. That's the way the math is. Tier 2, or current Tier 2, 169 currently, that would be going to 287. Why? Because they have 1 ERU. Tier 1, this is the tier I follow in, and like others, I don't flood. I'm not even in a flood zone, but I have no problem paying. I would go from 91 in Tier 1 to 154. 154 divided by 12, do that math, it's not that much. You divide, Dave Ramsey talks about being financially responsible. Personal finance is a responsibility here in Lynn Haven. Just do the math, it's not that hard. 287 per ERU.
Thank you. Mr. Langford's row.
Hey, good afternoon. So I've had several conversations with Commissioner Warwick about this, and I've emailed you all individually videos of what happens at my property. I'm not seeing any change, but I also don't have any issues paying. My problem is that I think that by separating the residential and the non-residential and putting the residential back on the water bill makes complete sense. And here's why. I've never been a fan of the impervious surface idea in the residential stance. And I'll kind of go into that. I can fit about 27 diesel trucks in my backyard. As long as they've all got tags on them, they run, they got insurance or whatever, I can put them back there and there ain't a thing the city can do about it. All right, that's impervious surfaces. I'll give you another example. It was about a 6-foot by 8-foot concrete extension added on in front of my front door. I just want to be able to sit on the front porch and watch the cars go by. I had to go down to the Bay County and have everything updated. Now, mind you, this was about 6 foot by 8 foot, right? I could go down right now and buy a vehicle and park it at my house in the grassy area, that same size, still impervious. Do you think I have to go down to the Bay County and report that I have a new vehicle parked in my point is that you're going to run yourselves ragged if you're trying to run down how many square feet of impervious surfaces are on every single resident. Honestly, the residential is going to be a flat rate. You can't solve for a negative number, right? It's just impossible. The commercial side, so again, taking that hybrid approach, like what's been brought up. Taking a hybrid approach where the non-residential isn't a tiered system, it makes sense. I just think that if you're trying to do the right thing, the residential piece, putting it back on the water bill makes sense. I know there may be some new people here that don't remember, but it was on the water bill before. This is not a foreign idea. It's not like this is some crazy thing that, oh my gosh, we don't know if the system's going to be able to handle it. How is this going to work? We did it for years. It was just the amount that was on the water bill wasn't the accurate amount based on what we need for the fund. So by taking a hybrid approach, residential back on the water bill, non-residential have it back, in that tiered structure. But there's been a couple of comments that were made. You can't tell me that there's more parcels of land than we have water meters in Lynn Haven. It don't make sense to me. I'm not a smart guy, but I got horse sense. So just something to think about. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else from this side for any comments. All right, coming to this side, we'll skip the first couple of rows. Anything else from you, Ms. Ashbrook? Anything from anyone else in regards to stormwater? All right, if there's nothing else. So as a commission, how do we want to move forward? In order to give staff some direction. So one of the I guess the first option is to decide, do we want to continue with our tier system or a tier system versus the water bill? So that's the first thing for us to have a brief discussion on, is that we want to continue with the a tier system versus the water bill, putting it back on the water bill.
Well, while the water bill system can make sense, based on, we did have recommendations from the Financial Review Committee not to do it. I want to put trust in our committees. My one other concern, and I'm glad Mr. Bashir's brought it up, was if we do that, we are going to have issues with apartments. And I'll give an example of why we would. So if you go back to when Hurricane Michael hit, Panama City dealt with a similar issue in a way. So what happened was, when the hurricane hit Panama City apartments, they used that as an excuse to evacuate the apartments, make them better, charge more, and then now everyone could come back into those apartments, and now they're required to pay more. What that taught us is that apartments don't lower their prices, right? So based on a tragic incident or a positive incident, they don't lower their prices. So what's going to happen is, as it stands now, the apartments are already charging their residents for this stormwater. They're not paying for it. We're charging the apartments, but they're charging their people to do it.
Only if they have a master meter.
Yes, thank you. Only if they have a master. Thank you for that correction. So for the ones with the master meters, if we start charging that, then they're just going to add that. If we take it, well, I guess if it's only the master meter, then we should be fine. I disregard what I said. Yeah, so that covers that.
I guess based on that concept, that's what every business does, though. I mean, that's what Walmart does. That's what Publix does. That's what Winn-Dixie does. It always goes down to the consumer. So I do understand that, but that's business. I guess, Stephanie, could you come and share with us about we have a few more moments, because we have another meeting after this, in regards to the master meter and individual meter for the charges.
Absolutely. So the master meter, we have about 10 of them, and it services about 1,000 units essentially. How the property owner passes it on to their customer, their resident, that's up to them. However, when we charge for the water bill, we multiply it by the factor of apartments. So regardless if it's 10 apartments with 10 meters or one apartment with 10 units inside of it, it's the same cost. A few things to point out, though, is that we don't currently record the impervious space on the utility billing side. So while there's a will and a way to do something, we would need to know far in advance because it would completely restructure the way that we bill. It would be a big undertaking that we would just need time to prepare for. We don't record property owners on the utility bill either. So in the event of somebody moving in and out, we currently do not know who to bill for that. So we would have quite a bit of work to do to kind of restructure the way it reverting to owner. And then another thing to take into account is if they don't pay it, that would be turning off their water, which would be kind of a hard situation to do, but it's something that we do monthly. Just keep in mind that if they do go delinquent on that monthly payment, that would put them in jeopardy of losing access to their water services for the month. And then, of course, just the biggest one is passing the cost. It would take the cost off of the property owner and be putting it onto the tenant. We typically do several hundred turn-ons and offs a month. Most of those we record rental agreements, so most of those ins and outs are rentals.
All right, thank you. So from listening to us, hearing from the Finance Review Committee, comments from the citizens seem divided between the tier system and the utility system. Is there are any of us wanting to move forward with putting it back on the bill?
I think we need to have the city look at to see if it's even feasible and the cost and if it's financially effective to do it that way. Because I don't know the answer to those questions. And the city may or may not know. I mean, we just talked about this tonight, and there's probably things they got to look at, Maybe they need to call Hialeah and see how they do their things to kind of get an idea. I don't know. I think there's a lot of questions with that I don't know the answer to.
At the Finance Review Committee, our finance director did say it would be a finance nightmare because of the fact that, again, Hialeah may have a whole totally different system in terms of their system as opposed to ours. And one of the things that we do know is that when it does go through the property through the tax office, it is coming straight to us. So we know exactly how much has come in. I guess it was on the water bill before, it was $3.85. And here, we would surely have to set up probably, I don't know, another system or some sort. And that was one of the things that she did talk about, is making sure it was very accurate and that none of the money got coded somewhere else. Someone doesn't pay their bill, then you don't get that money for that month either. So it would be a huge undertaking.
All right, any other questions for the city manager?
Do we have any idea how much we pay the county to do it?
So that's the tax collector that we pay, and he takes a small percentage, and I think that percentage is either, I think it's 7% or 3%, somewhere along there. It's not very much at all. And just one other thing, it's the Chuck Purdue is the one that actually sends us the revenue that's coming in. One other thing to remember too is that the entire goal of us bringing this to you is to try to put our capital projects out front so that we're just not maintaining anything. We are absolutely moving forward and building our revenue and our reserves for the future, not just now, but for the future. So it's a very small percentage fee that he charges for that. And normally and I don't know if Kyle's still on the phone, normally they have that baked in, but I'll have to check with that and see. Okay.
It's 2%. The statute limits them to actual cost or 2%.
Yeah, okay. 2%.
All right. Commissioner Vandergrift.
What's the timeline? What's the bottom date when a decision has to be made?
So right now, by us not making a decision is holding up the budget process because they're having to get ready for a budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So ideally, before the end of April, we need to make a decision, which will put them ahead of schedule so that they can start making that. Obviously, it's not on the agenda tonight. We can bring it to the agenda next meeting and make a decision then and really making the decision depends on what we're asking them to do. For example, if we want Stantec to go back and tweak something in the tiers, then we would have to give that direction. So tonight, they're just looking for direction for us to say, this is how we move forward.
Well, I see two issues. One is the one brought up by the Finance Committee about the tiers with the fifth tier. And they said they didn't mind the 4, but they didn't like the 5. And the next issue is what Mr. Warwick said. We need to see the numbers on the suggestion that he's made based on what the city sees.
So I guess for clarification, what numbers are we looking for exactly?
Well, we want to compare, but if we don't have the numbers to compare, what it would look like with the 4, and then what, versus what it would look like with Mr. Warwick's plan.
Okay. All right, so if we could look at, I'm at, so they'll know what numbers to bring us back, because I didn't know if you were talking about numbers in regards to cost to do it or the actual revenue that's being generated. That's what I was asking.
Well, it is an issue about the revenue.
Got it. So if everybody's okay, then let's ask Stantec to present us with a 4-tier tweaking the tiers that, or tweaking the square footage that the Finance Review Committee mentioned.
Less disparity. Let's just say less disparity between the things.
But between those 4 tiers?
Yeah, like we don't like the early people paying more, the end people paying less. That's basically what was said, so.
Since we're, sorry, good.
What do you think, Sam?
Since we're having Stantec look at it, can we have them also look at tweaking the vacant property prices? I don't know exactly what it would change, but like Commissioner Ward kind of showed a difference between 39 per square, was it $39 per down to like $12? If we can see it, since they're already doing the math anyways, if we could go ahead and see the difference there, because if it's like, if it's just like a small change in what we're paying per month on the properties that are occupied, it might be worth looking at. So if they're already doing the math anyways, we might as well see if they can tweak a little bit with the vacant land, because that's probably the number one question I've got outside of the tier system.
All right, so if Stantec could follow up with us for that, and then if the city could draw the numbers from putting it back on the utility bill. Now, in this, putting it back on the utility bill, and what will we do with the non-commercial?
As far as them paying in the stormwater?
Right. Is that putting them on the tier system?
No, that would be based on 3,900 every 3,900 square feet of impervious area.
Got it. So they would get a.
Well, the methodology is the same.
So they would get a monthly bill also?
Right.
Okay. So if the city could calculate that for us, based on providing a monthly bill for the commercial and non-commercial. And if we could have all that for next meeting.
But possibly Stantec could look at the ERU too, because if the ERU is higher or set, it might take away the disparity.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you all today.